Mayor Pete doubled down on his awful corporate centrism on Fox News in an interview that he did with Chris Wallace.
Do you think that some of the solutions that are being offered, whether it's on climate change, Medicare for all, by Senators Warren and Sanders, are too drastic?
I think that we have a chance to build an American majority around bold action. But it is the case that we could wreck that majority through purity tests. Look, take the example of this Medicare question. I'm proposing Medicare for all who want it. It means we create a version of Medicare. Everybody can get access to it. And you get, if you want to keep your private plan, we're okay with that. I think that's a better policy than kicking people off of their plan. But I also think that it's something that more Americans can get behind. And when you think about the condition our country is going to be in when this presidency comes to an end, one way or the other, when you think about how torn apart by politics we're going to be, how polarized and divided this country is, this to me is not a political question, it's a question of governing. The good news is we can govern in a very bold and forward-leading direction, but we've got to make sure we do it in a way that moves toward unifying rather than further polarizing the American people.
Not surprisingly, the left is firing back at you when Elizabeth Warren said that she will not participate in big fundraisers, even if she is the Democratic nominee against Donald Trump in next fall. You said this, let's put it on the screen. We are not going to beat him, Trump, with pocket change. Here's how Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez responded. Small dollar grassroots campaigns, a.k.a. what Buttigieg insults here as pocket change, out fundraise him by millions. Our nation's leaders should be working to end the era of big money politics, not protect it. So, what do you have to say to AOC?
Well, first of all, you don't go from mayor of South Bend to a competitive presidential candidate without knowing a thing or two about grassroots campaigning. My campaign is fueled by the contributions of almost 600,000 individual donors, and most of those are small contributions. What I'm saying is that we can't go into this fight against Donald Trump with one hand tied behind our back. Look, the President of the United States and his allies just raised $125 million. They will pull out all of the stops to stay in power. And I think we have a responsibility to the country to make sure that we go into this fight as Democrats with everything that we've got and not unilaterally disarming. We indeed need to end the era of big money politics. That's why campaign finance reform is so important, and it will never happen as long as the folks currently in charge stay there.
You can't argue for campaign finance reform like you just did while also disagreeing with the principle of it, which is what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders are arguing for. Did you notice that contradiction? He's like, well, I mean, we got to do campaign finance reform. It's really important. Why? Why do we have to do campaign finance reform? Finish that thought. Why? Why? Because the current way we do elections has legalized bribery, is corrupt. So you're saying it's corrupt and we got to reform it, while at the same time saying, I don't want to go into the fight with Trump with one hand tied behind my back, so I'm going to play by the same rules. So in other words, it's really corrupt and we need to stop it, and oh yeah, I'm going to participate in it. Mayor Pete is a hack. Mayor Pete is a fraud. Mayor Pete believes in nothing except getting Mayor Pete elected. Is that clear enough? There are tweets from Mayor Pete back when he was pretending to be on the left, where he was arguing with people on Twitter saying he's for Medicare for all. In no uncertain terms. There was a receipt that it said Medicare for all written on it, and he said, like, working on it, tweeted that one day. And now all of a sudden, he's the biggest opponent of Medicare for all, and he's arguing for Medicare for all who want it, which is just a public option, and the problem with the public option is the private health insurance companies are going to take all the sick people, pawn them off to the government system, the public option, and then they're going to keep all the healthy people, and then the quality is going to tank of the public system because it's not fully funded, because there's no single payer, there's no risk pool that's spread around. It's all the sick people that are in there. So it's going to be overburdened, the quality is going to suffer, and then everybody's going to turn around and go, see, private systems are better. And he knows this. He's smart enough to know this. Did you know that Mayor Pete, there was a segment from him maybe a year ago. He was on like Morning Joe, and we covered it. We covered it at the time. I forgot about it, but it's been brought back up to my attention. It was brought back up to my attention. He said, and this was a great point, he said, well, hold on now. Medicare for all is the compromise. Mayor Pete said that? Yes, Mayor Pete said that. He said Medicare for all is the compromise. The true left-wing position is the NHS in the UK. You know what the NHS is? Public funding of public institutions. So not only are the tax dollars the insurance, it's also that all of the doctors work for the government. Everything is public. Everything is government when it comes to healthcare. That's the true left-wing position. And he says the middle ground is Medicare for all. Medicare for all is public funding, so a single payer, a single insurer of private institutions. So, in other words, the doctors can be private. The doctors can be private. They can run their own practice. They're not employed by the government. They can be self-employed or work for, a different private group or whatever it is. But it's a single insurer. That's Medicare for all. So there's public funding of public institutions, NHS. There's public funding of private institutions. That's like France. He says that's the compromise. So we need to change the debate. We need to change the debate to reflect what it is in reality. That's what he said. Now he's totally against Medicare for all. Oh my God, it's too far left. It's too scary, even though I just called it a compromise not too long ago. And the thing that I'm arguing for is a public option that I'm misleadingly calling Medicare for all who want it. And I'm pretending like I don't understand why that's a terrible idea. Somebody tweeted at me, and I love this because he took my example and ran it through the finish line. Mayor Pete's next proposal is going to be firefighters for all who want it. It's a great way of thinking about this. Certain things, it's preposterous to argue, choice is so important. You should always be able to choose your doctor, and you will under Medicare for all. But the idea of choice outside of that for health insurance, you want a choice as to which mafia is going to rip you off and price gouge you? How about we get rid of the mafia? How about we get rid of the price gouger? That's my take. So Medicare for all who want it. Oh, please. So he wants to negotiate from the watered down position. He also says purity tests. We're going to ruin it with purity tests. No, it turns out that when you look back at recent American history, the problem wasn't purity tests. The problem was the lack of purity tests. So what do I mean by that? We had a Democratic supermajority under the Obama administration. Now, the left at the time was not as ascendant, and we didn't have the rallying cry around a bunch of specific policies back then like we do right now. What's our rallying cry today? Medicare for all, free college, living wage, end the wars, Green New Deal, legalize marijuana, criminal justice reform, release all the nonviolent drug offenders. We have really clear policy goals that we believe in. Take no corporate PAC money, don't be corrupt. Super specific. Back then, we didn't have that. Back then, Democrats were elected, and it was a whole bunch of different messages that they ran on. None of them were as bold and as strong and as correct as Bernie Sanders. And so we had a Democratic supermajority, and we got a Republican healthcare plan, Obamacare. That's an individual mandate style system. That style of reform originally came from the Heritage Foundation, which is a right-wing think tank. We literally took the right's own healthcare plan and passed it. It's Romneycare. It's Romneycare. That's what it is. So the problem was we didn't have a purity test. We didn't hold politicians' feet to the fire. We didn't say, no, you're going to do this or we're going to primary you and you're going to lose. If we had that at the time, maybe we would have gotten at least a public option. We could have gotten Medicare for all if they actually believed in it and fought for it. If we were organized around that issue and we could all systems go full court press when they don't fall in line. So that's the problem, Pete. The problem wasn't a lack of purity test. The problem was a lack of purity test. The problem wasn't a purity test. So what Mayor Pete wants is for you to shut up and fall in line and vote for him regardless of what he ends up doing. How mighty convenient that is. And then finally, he says, we need to be unifying the country, not polarizing the country. Okay, well, I got news for you. You don't do that. You're way more polarizing than you are unifying. Why do I say that? The polls. Mayor Pete's supporters are mostly relatively affluent white people. Relatively affluent white people. He's got 2% support among black people. And he doesn't do particularly well with the crossover Trump voters. The people who do the best with that are Bernie Sanders and Andrew Yang. So his idea, we got to unify the country, not polarize the country. Okay, well, thank you for endorsing Bernie. I really appreciate that. And by the way, this message, unify around what, Pete? Pete will say, I'm for good things and against bad things. We should unify around that. What does that mean? Here, I got an idea. You want to unify around something? Class solidarity. How about that? How about the top 1% and corporations and billionaires are rigging the system against regular people, and we're going to unify against those people and reform this government to work for the 99%? How about, you want to do that? Oh, no, you don't want to do that. Oh, you wanted to do platitudes and cliches and say nothing and get people to like you anyway. That's what you wanted to do. You wanted to stand for nothing, believe in nothing, and still get the title of president and get people to vote for you. That's what you want. He's such a fraud, I can't take it. I cannot get over. The grossest part of that was he's flat out arguing for corruption, just so you know. Oh, I don't want to go against Trump with one hand tied behind my back. We can't do unilateral disarmament. So in other words, you're saying, I'm against the corruption, but I'm going to partake in the corruption. Because he says, we got to do campaign finance reform. We have to do it. Okay, why? Because the system's corrupt. But then you also say, we got to play by the rules, so I got to be corrupt. What do you want me to do? This is the lunatic ramblings of a person who really does believe in nothing. I'm not kidding, guys. He doesn't believe in anything. He will say anything to get elected, and he's just playing a game. This is all a game to him. That's all it is. You think he actually is concerned about... If he really cared about the 30 to 45,000 Americans who die every year because they don't have health care, he would say Medicare for all, and that's it. He would be unflinching, uncompromising on that position. You know, if he actually cared about the 500,000 Americans that go bankrupt every year because of medical bills, he would be unflinching on in that stand. You know, but he doesn't care. He doesn't care. And he is one of the favorites now of the establishment and of Wall Street. So now you know. And you could see that he very clearly pivoted in that direction because he sees a lane there. And he really exposed himself as quite the fraud.